Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Clarity from Chaos. This is a whole new 2015, and we've got all kinds of just terrific guests lined up. Starting out the new year, we have the author of Ant Farm, What's Bugging Society. He's also our go-to insider libertarian. I would like everybody to sit back and enjoy a conversation with Mr. Stephen Gray. Good evening, sir.
Good evening to you. Thank you for having me back.
Oh, I was looking forward to it, Stephen. I really was.
Great.
I trust your holidays were well?
They were. It was a busy holiday, but a productive one and a good one and a little bit of downtime as well, and I hope the same for you.
Uh-huh. How's the book doing?
So far, so good. You know, just trying to spread the message of liberty in any way, shape, and form I can, and certainly this book, Ant Farm, is one of the ways that I've been trying to do it. You know, people have been enjoying the free chapters at antfarmbook.com, and some people that enjoy the free chapters go on and purchase the rest of the book. So I can't complain.
Wow, that's terrific. I'd like to kind of focus our discussion tonight on the topic of Cuba.
Yes.
And it is intriguing to me, having lived through, the Cuban Missile Crisis and all of the other parts and pieces, that we find ourselves where we're at right now. Any opening thoughts around it?
Listen, I would just like to say that I guess for all of the things that the president has done wrong, I'm not going to fault him on the things that he does right. And I think that this instance of, lifting these restrictions on Cuba can only be a good thing. And I know there's a lot of people out there that would disagree, but I can't completely understand where they're coming from. Unfortunately, I've tried to listen, and I just don't see it.
Well, it's interesting, Stephen. I don't see it either. It would seem to me that having grown up through the whole Cuban Missile thing, where we were covering our heads and ducking and covering under our desks as school children and everything else for fear of the nuclear holocaust.
Right.
That the island of Cuba shouldn't represent that big of an issue, and I have to agree with you. I have been a very, very vocal opponent of our president. I have a lot of things to say, but this particular instance, I'm like you. I have to go along with it. I see no downside here.
Yeah. I think I do see a bit of a potential downside, and even despite the potential downside, I think there's more benefits to be reaped by more people, even despite those downsides. One of the downsides, of course, is that by people being able to trade more with Cuba or travel more to Cuba and spend their money there, you're going to be inadvertently supporting their government through the taxes they collect on the money you spend there. And of course,
sure,
that's not a great thing. So that is one of the downsides, and certainly people that argue against these new advancements in Cuba are pointing that out as one of the go-to downsides. They're saying, well, do you want to support the Cuban government with your money, because that's exactly what you're doing? And of course, those people are right. But the positives just tremendously outweigh the negatives, because yes, some of your money is going to go to the state through taxation, but some of your money is also going to go to the people. I lived in Canada for 30 years, and I held a U.S. passport, so I was never really able to go to Cuba. But a lot of my peers went there on vacation, and because there was no ban for Canadians. And so they would spend their money in Cuba. And one of the things they were able to do as tourists was to tip some of the poor people that live there. And I just can't see how that hurts those people. It can only help them. And so more of that is certainly a good thing, despite the money that you're going to have to give to their state.
Well, I find it absolutely ironic that argument would even be made when we have been pumping billions of dollars into Saudi Arabia and the Middle East to propel our little vehicles around. And just look at the human rights violations. It's a known fact that the Saudis and the oil money is the underpinning for a lot of the terrorist groups. And so, we have the ability, this is the irony that I find, we have the ability to immediately rescind the oil exporting laws that were passed in the mid to late 70s, and we have the absolute ability to launch the Keystone Pipeline, to do a lot of other things to unhinge ourselves from that dependency.
Right.
But that argument, people would argue over Castro and his human rights violations as opposed to Hamas or ISIS or any of those other groups, and I find it just almost it's just hilarious.
It really is. And listen, let's not also discount some of the atrocious things that the U.S. military is doing overseas, in my opinion. But but that's another discussion for another day, I guess. But at the end of the day, listen, I can't say with certainty. I can't predict the future about how this new advancement with Cuba is going to go. I can't say for sure if it's going to continue to prop up the state or if it's going to help the people more. Of course, I lean towards the latter. I think it's definitely going to help the people more, but I can't say for certain. But the important thing here is I should get to choose for myself, and you should get to choose for yourself if you want to go there, if you want to spend money there. It's not up to any government. It shouldn't be up to any government to tell you, me, or any other individual where we're allowed to spend our money, where we're allowed to travel to. That really flies in the face of any concept of freedom. And so if there's people out there that vehemently disagree with this new policy, I say I fully support their freedom to decide to not spend money there or to not travel there.
Oh yeah.
I would encourage against it, but I don't know why they can't afford me the same respect and why they have to tell me no, Stephen Aaron Gray. I think that you should be put in jail if you want to spend money there or travel there. It's just that part is ludicrous to me.
Oh, it to me it's ludicrous as well. And then I pull up the stuff from Marco Rubio, who he's just gone off the cliff as far as arguing against this. Now Rand Paul took a step back and said, why the hell not? I mean, it's ridiculous. It's basically the same discussion points that we've brought up.
Right.
Where it's kind of like no harm, no foul, gentlemen. Where's the issue? I mean, now we can start smoking Cubans again. Come on,
right.
Right. What's the issue? And we could start getting decent rum. And and these people, they can build casinos, and they can actually turn it into a Caribbean just destination like it used to be.
Right.
So I have a serious issue with a lot of this.
I'm with you. And doesn't that really reveal the hypocrisy of someone like Rubio
and
so many other Republicans who you hear them say over and over again, we're for freedom, we're for individual choice, except on our one little pet issue that we want to control your lives about, or more often several pet issues. In so many ways, they're really just like Democrats. They just want to control different parts of your life. And that's really one of the points I tried to make clear in my book, Ant Farm, is that that's the game of politics. It doesn't matter who's in power. They always want to increase their ability to control you in different ways. And at the end, it really all adds up to the same thing, and that's tyranny.
Oh, absolutely. All it truly is, and we just saw it with the House, with the Speaker election and everything else. I mean, it really is an argument over who has the car keys, and
Right.
that's all it is. It's
Yes.
got nothing to do with the kids in the back seat or anything else. It's
Right.
who's driving the car, and that's the whole argument. The kids in the back seat, we're stuck. We're stuck along for the ride with absolutely no voice in the matter at all.
Yes.
And to me, that's the way I feel about it. You've got a jackass and an elephant in the front seat, but it doesn't really matter. Either one of them could drive the car, and all they do is argue as who's got the keys.
Exactly right, and both of them are going to send us off a cliff unless we change things. And unfortunately, that's a hard thing to do. People ask me all the time, what's a good solution? And there's not many good solutions. There are some, but they're very challenging. And I certainly don't think the solution on a federal level especially lies within the political framework that's presented for us. That framework in and of itself is really designed to hand the keys from one of these two drivers to the other.
Right. It absolutely is. And, I've wrestled with this and wrestled with it. I come up with, perhaps it is time to make a much bigger challenge for the third party, for the Libertarian Party, for example, to somewhat try to break up the club. But the problem that we have, Stephen, is the media, because the media is really those 6 CEOs that run all of the media, print media, all of the media across the United States. That's where the issue is, because if we can't get a piece of that, I don't know that we stand a chance, because they're driving everything anyway.
Yeah, the media certainly plays a very big role. There's actually an instance in my book, an ant farm, where I explore the idea of, so first of all, it's about little ants that walk and talk. It's a metaphor, of course, for current society.
Sure.
And, there's a blue ant and there's a red ant, and they're debating for their presidential election. And there is a third party that wants to enter in the debates. And this particular chapter in the book just really shows how essentially they screw this third party candidate over, partly through media, but partly through the power that the red ants and the blue ants hold. And also a large part of it is the general public and what they're willing to take and what they're willing to not take. And unfortunately, the general public is willing to take too much, and they're not willing to really listen to any other viable third candidate. And I think that's a major problem. So I really think that advancements for liberty do have to be made outside of the political sphere. And there's ways that can be done, and there are peaceful ways that can be done, because, people always think, oh, you must mean violent revolution, and in no way, shape, or form do I mean that at all. No, I'm talking more about a peaceful evolution, which has been done through history before, and generally that kind of change is more effective and lasting than a violent revolution anyway.
Oh, I would agree, and my hope is that, Rand Paul, and there's several other ones, and I don't know if there's going to be a libertarian candidate in 16 or not. Right. But I would hope that everybody gets an invitation to the process, because I do think it's time that all of these ideas are brought forward, and, they don't kneecap individuals just because, they threaten to take the car keys.
It's true.
But,
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh,
no, I was
right.
just going to say, it's wishful thinking when I say that they probably would kneecap anybody that got in their way, but it's maybe it just starts as simple as these discussions that you and I have, and maybe between you promoting it and me promoting it, we can start getting some traction where people actually stop and instead of thinking of the answer, actually listen to the discussion first,
Yep. It's true. Of course, you first need to change the hearts and minds, and that's a big challenge. And then once you've done that, what's next? I'm very skeptical that any number that you'd ever be able to get a significant number of pro-liberty people voting in favor of true liberty. That's such a long road, and I think there are other shorter roads, challenging roads, mind you, but shorter roads to achieve liberty. And I think one of those ways is peaceful civil disobedience, which we see again and again. But even with that, you need numbers, but you don't need a majority like you do with a vote. You just need a good chunk of people, and I think that kind of thing is much more attainable, especially as more and more people get fed up, because, it's going to be a long time until you get 51% of the population fed up. But if you get 10% of the population, that really is enough for large-scale, peaceful civil disobedience. And that kind of activism can really change things. There are parts of the country where it's happening right now. I think of what's going on in New Hampshire a lot of the time, and I follow that quite closely. And they're seeing some real victories there without involving the political process at all. They're also having some success with the political process as well, but even if they were not, they're having outside of the political process success, and I'd love to see more of that.
I would too, but what worries me is I think people are scared of freedom. They're scared of liberty because it brings that big R word along with it.
Sure.
If you have freedom and you have liberty, then you're responsible. And my God, if you do something wrong and you're responsible, then what?
Yep. Yeah. I think responsibility scares a great number of people, but what I think scares people even more is security. People fear that without the state controlling their every move, we're going to be in a much more dangerous situation. And I think they don't realize that the numbers really, the statistics really show that, in fact, the opposite is true. The more the government takes control of your life, the less safe you are. And so I feel like that is at least a logical argument that you can convince people of. And it's just going to take some time. If people want to be irresponsible, it's going to be hard to change that. But if people are worried about security, it's possible to change their minds on that. And that's of course, one of the things I know that you're trying to do with your program, and it's certainly one of the things I've tried to do with my book.
Right. No, exactly. I just pulled up a Reuters report. It looks like Cuba's gone ahead and going to release at least 2 prisoners in meeting the U.S. agreements that Obama put down. So it looks like it's already started. So maybe they'll go forward. Like we said at the top of the show, I don't agree with I fervently disagree with about 99.9% of everything that our president has done to this point. But yeah. I do agree on this particular instance that I see a bigger upside than I do a downside, and am kind of wondering, there's this skeptic in me, Stephen, that wonders why now, what where's the rest of the iceberg?
Right.
What's going on that he would actually do something that made sense now? And so it makes me wonder.
Yeah, I'm with you. Anytime a politician, makes a decision in favor of freedom, I'm pleasantly surprised and also vastly confused, because it just never
Yes.
it almost never happens, and it's almost never in their best interest politically to do it. So yeah, I'm not sure his motivation. Maybe it's some kind of insidious reason, or maybe it's truly because he sees the positive in this. Either way, I don't really care about his motivation. I just care that the right thing is being done. I think it's positive in that regard for sure.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you. I tend to be such a skeptic, given the politics and everything, that you just have a hard time believing.
Oh yeah.
That these individuals, and when I say these individuals, I mean all of them. I don't mean just Republicans, and I don't mean just Democrats. I mean every damn one of them has a authentic bone or piece of integrity in them. I just don't. It's and the reason I say that is I've had Bill Walker on the show, and we've talked about the constitutional conventions. And Bill took Congress to court. Although he didn't win, he took Congress to court to force them into acknowledging that they needed to acknowledge the petitions to call a convention.
Right.
And as part of that process, Stephen, every congressman and senator put their name forward, basically as stating that to the affirmative that there were no petitions, and that includes, which is completely illegal because there have been plenty of petitions to call a convention, which includes Gohmert and everybody that seems to be the media darling out there. So all of these guys behind the scenes are doing what they need to do for themselves. There is no issue for what's good for the country, what's good for the people. Let the people sort through these things, because at the end of the day they know just as well or better what they need to do than obviously I do. Yeah. So I just don't trust any of them.
I'm right there with you, so much to the point where I've really lost faith completely in the political system, and I just don't think it's worthwhile. I think it's a waste of time, and I know I get a lot of critics who say, well, it's your right, you should do it, you shouldn't complain if you don't vote, and I just think it's a waste of time, and I think history has proven me right that it is a waste of time. I've lost complete faith in our judicial system, and that doesn't mean I have no moral compass. I think I've got a strong moral compass, but I don't think I need words on paper written by bureaucrats to tell me what's right and what's wrong, nor do I think anyone needs that. Everyone knows, well, not everyone, most people know what's right and what's wrong without a judge having to tell them what's right and what's wrong. If you've got a reasonable upbringing and you observe the world around you, you can generally assess that it's good to let people live how they want and not interfere with their lives. And unfortunately, the law too often, and politicians too often, vote legislation in that directly conflicts with that premise.
Well, that's because, the legislation typically only supports their position or whatever that, they want. It doesn't, by and large, support the individual or anything else. I mean, I sit here and think about the closing scene in Fountainhead, where where the architect stands up and basically says, "Kiss my ass, I built the damn thing, so I blew it up."
Right.
And people, it just goes from there. And I'm like you. I have lost faith in it, but I will say that the morality, the moral compass that you mentioned, I believe that's ingrained in everybody's DNA.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it's there. Now you can choose not to listen to it, or you can choose to listen to it, but that little voice is in everybody. And, that little voice on one shoulder or the other shoulder is there. And it is enhanced by your parents and your grandparents and how you grow up. But those natural laws, I believe, are ingrained in your DNA. And
I think you're
you
probably
come into
right.
this world with them.
Yeah, I think you're probably
I haven't
right.
I haven't found anybody, Stephen, that can tell me where they learned it from. Right? My parents, where did you learn right from wrong? Well, I learned it from my parents. Well, where did they learn it from? And it keeps bouncing backwards. And if you bounce it backwards far enough, what do you end up with? Right?
Right.
So I have to believe that it's part of the DNA of the species.
Sure.
So,
yeah. I mean, humans probably, there's a good argument to be made that humans may have evolved from this very premise, because perhaps there were creatures related to humans that didn't abide by that sort of golden rule, and disaster ensued, and they're no longer in existence. And we are, because we generally adhere to it. But it's just frustrating to see also that that various governments around the world so often contradict that. They're going against what you would call our human nature, and it's very frustrating to see. And they really do manage to brainwash people into thinking that their way is the better way.
Yes, they absolutely do. And they spend inordinate amounts of money and time on that brainwashing, on that very brainwashing. If you look at Edward Bernays, when he wrote the book, on public relations, Goebbels used that book, even though it was written in the 1920s, I believe. Goebbels took that book, and that's how he convinced an entire country to go to war.
Right.
And go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, to circle back to the Cuba situation that we've been discussing throughout, I was actually talking to somebody the other day, and he was saying, I really do agree with the president's decision, just as you and I do, to allow trade and travel with Cuba, but he was very adamantly opposed to the way in which the president went about doing it, by not getting Congress's approval and instead just acting unilaterally by executive decision. And he would have liked to have instead seen the president go through Congress. And I just, I was trying to convince him that that's not, if you want to do the right thing, you should do the right thing. You shouldn't have to ask everybody's permission. You shouldn't need this legislative body to tell you, okay, that's right. If you know it's right, because it adheres to natural law, then you should go for it. And it seemed like almost this person I was arguing with or debating with was saying that the real moral compass should be the law. And it shouldn't be, and it hasn't been in a long time.
No. I that scares me. That concept right there scares me.
Yeah.
Now, law, common law and all of that stuff should be the outgrowth of natural law, which I believe that's the way it was developed.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't be the other way around.
Yeah.
Because I at least personally, go ahead.
I was going to say, even that expression that we hear time and again whenever a police officer tries to give you a ticket, then they tell you, well, ignorance of the law is no excuse if you don't know about some obscure traffic law in one particular area. And the origin of that expression is actually very interesting and almost the exact opposite of what they mean when they say it to you. the expression ignorance of the law is no excuse means that it applies to things that are so obvious that you couldn't possibly claim ignorance. Like, you can't say, oh, I didn't know I wasn't allowed to murder that person and get away with it, because it's just so ingrained in human nature or human upbringing that you should know. You can't say I was ignorant of that law and get away with it. It was never meant for things like, oh, you didn't know you had to stop 3 seconds at a stop sign, you only stopped 2. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. No, that's not how it was meant at all. So it's again, it's frustrating to see these concepts turned around.
Well, and it's interesting because the way you explained it, Stephen, basically comes from the natural law that we've been discussing, right?
Yes.
Thou shalt not kill. There's basic concepts that are ingrained in all of us that, to me, trump all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And
really, it can be applied back to the Cuba situation that we were talking about, which is, listen, somebody I know wants to travel to Cuba. Should I involve the violent arm of the state to stop that person or not? No. If that person's not hurting anybody, nobody should be hurting him. Nobody should be stopping him from doing what he wants to do. That doesn't mean I have to agree with it. That doesn't mean I have to do the same thing. But if that person wants to go to Cuba and is not hurting anyone in the process, he should be allowed to do it. And, as we were discussing earlier, I think it's going to have a net benefit anyway on the Cuban people.
Oh, I agree. I agree completely. Unfortunately, Stephen, I think we've run out of time. I want to thank you so much for agreeing to come back on the show. It's such a treat for me to get to talk to you that I really appreciate it.
Hey, listen, thank you again.
If you don't mind, I plan on calling on you every so often so we can keep up to speed and continue to carry this conversation forward. If you can, let's plug your book, the Ant Farm, about bugging, a novel about bugging society. People can obviously get it on Amazon. Where else can they get it?
Amazon is probably the best place, but if people do want to download those first 4 chapters for free first and then decide on the merits of those chapters if they want to buy the rest of the book, the place you go and do that is antfarmbook.com.
Well, there you go. It's been terrific, Stephen. I really appreciate your time. Hopefully, 2015 will turn out to be a high water mark for the book and for whatever you've got going.
Excellent. Thank you again for having me on. I look forward to chatting with you again in the future.
Thank you, Stephen.